Yes, Mr. Shepherd. If the fuselage came through as quickly as the wings, we'd gain 2 aircraft a month.
2 aircraft, eh? Ask Mr. Kendall to bring in last month's production charts. Right, Vic. I'll sort that out. Mind you, I'll hold you to those 2 aeroplanes. The wings are getting ahead. Let's see where we can knock some hours off the fuselage. Has Tom any suggestions?
Well, he said he's reached saturation point.
That's a new one. What do you mean with that?
Too many of his people trying to get at the job at the same time.
Looks like an assembly problem to me. Better chase it up straight away. How's it going today, Reg?
A bit empty, Mr. Shepherd. Too many of a kind in here. We get on faster if you gave some of them a holiday.
If we could take out that riveting job, it would speed up the rest of the work in the forebody.
Yes, Mr. Shepherd. It would give them a chance to get on with it instead of treading on each other's toes all the time.
Hello? Get me Mr. Lewis, will you?
I see. Bill, bring me over the lines drawing of the Stirling fuselage. I'm just sending for the drawing. Here it is. Well, it looks all right at first sight, Shep. Anyhow, I'll be over this afternoon to see you. Shep wants to make the coupe fairing a sub-assembly of the fuselage.
Come in first. Have you got the drawing?
Yes, here it is. There's no snag there, Shep. The structure remains the same, and air breakdown covers it.
Good. That's fine. Well, that'll clear that bit of work out of the fuselage and give our chaps more room for the other jobs. Old Bill's done a nice job on my breakdown model, Perth. Pity the real thing isn't as simple as this. Well, the coupe fairing goes straight into production as a sub-assembly, and that means designing a jig to make it on. So that's what we decided to do, and it wasn't long before coupe fairings were coming off that jig well up to schedule, and made by women too. But that's not the whole story of how we speeded up on Stirlings. The coupe fairing idea was part of a bigger plan to break down the wings and fuselage into sub-assemblies. That is, into a number of sections which can be made on separate jigs or master frames, and then fitted together afterwards to make a complete component such as a wing or a fuselage. The coupe is a sub-assembly. The coupe fairing is a sub-assembly. So too is the nose section. In fact, we broke down the fuselage alone into 19 of them. Of course, this meant a lot of problems for us. For instance, we had to make about 10,000 extra drawings to plan out the new stages of the work. But when a problem is solved, it has its effect right through the factory.
This is the new fuselage assembly works where I'm foreman. The fuselage sub-assemblies come to us from other factories dotted about the country, and it's our job to build these components together into the main assembly, the fuselage. The shell of the fuselage comes to us in 4 sections. Aircraft production needs such a fine degree of accuracy that we can't take anything on trust, not even when it's come off a jig. So we use a clinometer at all stages of the job as a final check for alignment. It's really only a glorified spirit level. Flush riveting is skilled work and needs more experience than you'd think if rivets are not to be left sticking out from the sheeting. This is important, for any roughness on the skin of an aircraft, like barnacles on a ship's bottom, slows it down. As soon as we can, we slip the turrets in so that the operators can get straight onto the pipe runs for the hydraulic power. We're lucky in these assembly factories because we can see our work taking shape, and that always helps. And we've got to be on our toes all the time if we're to keep up with the boys on the wings.
Our job of wing final assembly starts off with the box truss, as we call it, the rectangular frame we build up into the wing. I'm the foreman, and when the box truss comes in, it's my job to look nippy and see that it's laid out at the correct flying angle. Until this is done, we can't get down to any other jobs. The next step is to offer up the trailing edge for fitting, while other chaps get down to the wingtip. Many new people coming into the factory say to me, "Those joints don't look too strong," but if you look closely, you'll see that each fixing is an overlap of the main support, and that gives almost a double strength to each joint. She's moving up the line by now, and it isn't long before she's beginning to look like a wing. These engine mountings, we call them nacelles, must be fixed early to give time for the engine feeds and controls to be fitted. They're a bit tricky, and you've got to do them in sequence, for with so little room, no more than 2 of us can get down to the job at the same time. Not like these fuselage chaps, who want such a lot of room to work in.
We're on to the detailed fitting work of the fuselage by now. Once over a target, bomb doors must be opened and bombs away without a hitch. And it's up to us to see that they do. And above the bomb floors, in the fuselage itself, we're busy laying in the conduits for the main dashboard. We bring the dashboard in at the first chance, because until that's fixed, we can't test out any of the control runs that have already been installed in the fuselage. Here's another important sub-assembly: undercarriage levers, throttles, brake, air screws, landing lights. Being so complicated, it's much easier to build up this throttle box on the bench and then bring it in as a unit. Fitting out the fuselage needs a bit of planning. It's no good putting in part of the oxygen system only to find old George is taking it out next day to get his flying controls in. You've got to follow suit and complete each job. There's a lot of work in these aircraft, and there's not much wasted space in an airplane these days.
Seven fuel tanks go in each wing, and that's not counting the oil tanks. These tanks are coated with a composition which automatically seals up any bullet holes made if Jerry gets at them. Each main fuel tank holds 300 gallons, enough for an hour's flight. Then there's the undercarriage. That's tucked up under each inboard engine. Nice little bit of design in there.
Well, there's another one out. Any new production method, like the coupe fairing and the other sub-assembly breakdowns, is a bit tricky at first, so we're all very much on the watch to see how it plans out.
That seems to be it. The wings and the fuselage may be pretty good jobs on their own, but they won't fly like that, whatever the boys who made them may think. It's in the erection sheds that the aeroplane really begins to take shape.
Straight now. Steady.
These days, it's important to erect aircraft in the shortest possible time and to use as few of these specially skilled men as you can. So the order of operations is planned to enable the men to progress steadily from one job to the next. Within a couple of hours of the fuselage coming in, one crew of operators will have fitted the fin and rudder, tailplanes and elevators, and be ready to move on to the flying controls for the wings. We lift the fuselage into flying or horizontal position, that is, tail up, before fixing the main planes, so that we can get well clear of the floor and leave room underneath for work on the undercarriages.
Whoa, whoa! Hold it! Hold it!
Each main plane with its two engines weighs about 6 tons. Fixed inside the fuselage, there is really a third part of the wing structure, which we call the centre section, and it's to this that the wing roots are bolted. When this has been done, the main spars of the wings form a continuous length from wingtip to wingtip. As its wings have no outside struts or wire supports, the Stirling is what the textbook calls a cantilever monoplane. This bolting of the wings to the fuselage is one of the most important jobs on the aeroplane, and until it's done, we can't get ahead with checking of wings for alignment. The wingtip is more than 60 feet from the tip of the tailplane, and yet there is never more than a fingernail's breadth between the measurement of port and starboard sides. This is a real test of accurate jigging, because both the wings and the tailplanes are drilled separately from their mating parts on the fuselage. Once the inspectors have okayed the wings, the air screws are fitted. If you can imagine about 30 motor buses standing on each of the wings, you'll get some idea of the power in these 4 engines. It's a big problem to carry enough fuel for engines as powerful as these. After all, each one uses about 40 gallons an hour at cruising speed. And the more bombs you carry, the less fuel there'll be room for and the shorter your flying range. But a Stirling's a real weightlifter, and fuel tanks are fitted into every available space. Here is a tank which forms the leading edge of the wing. To avoid fire in an emergency, say before a crash landing, a plane must get rid of its fuel immediately. So there's a control which opens a valve in the fuel tank and at the same time releases these jettison stockings to guide the stream of fuel away from the engines. The Stirling with full load weighs about 30 tons. When it's on the ground, the 2 wheels of the main undercarriages and the small twin wheels of the rear chassis have to carry this weight. Yet the air pressure in these huge balloon tyres is not much more than in the tyres of a motor car. One of the most interesting things about the Stirling is the gouge flap, fitted to the rear or trailing edge of each wing. Heavy aircraft need a large wing area. This is a bit of a handicap when considering speeds, so in the Stirling we have a way of getting rid of wing area when we don't need it. The gouge flap is just an extra piece of wing which can be tucked away and then pushed out when the aircraft is flying slowly, say taking off or landing. A flap like this, when pushed out, acts as an air brake and gives a slow, safe landing speed. The tail has been lowered to the ground by now, as all the rest of the work in the flight shed can be done with the aircraft tail down. The rudder is a very sensitive control. Its angle and alignment must be absolutely correct, otherwise it would be a drag on the aeroplane in much the same way as a flat tyre on a motor car. This is true also of the elevators and ailerons. All flying controls must be light and easy to handle, otherwise the pilot would be exhausted by a long flight. And remember that these long-range aircraft must be in the air for hours at a time. And thanks to the design of the controls and the care with which they've been fitted, the Stirling is as sensitive to the helm as a racing yacht. The Undercarriage Test run is really our showpiece. In flight, It is worked in emergency by hand. Remember, the undercarriage has to be rigid enough to support many tons of weight on the ground, and yet tuck away neatly in flight into a compact shape which offers the least resistance to the airstream. The Stirling doesn't hang about in the air, and the smooth finish adds to its speed. Sometimes we hear of aircraft returning from operations with undercarriages jammed. This has happened to Stirlings, but apart from the bending of the 4 sets of air screw blades, the pilot has landed without doing anything more than minor damage, and that speaks well for the strength of the aeroplane. This is because the 2 main girders of the bomb floors under the fuselage, which have to stand up to such a crash, are designed to make a sort of natural keel and to protect the rest of the structure. Anyway, they've got to carry the bomb load, some 8 tons. Here is a loading test with a fairly small bomb, only a 500-pounder. We all know how important a rear gunner is. Small wonder then that his turret must work without a hitch. See how snugly it fits into the general line of the fuselage. Well, it won't be long now before the machine is in the air, and our part of the job is over.
You know, every time I see a Stirling come out of the flight sheds, it still gives me quite a kick. Most of us feel that the machine is our baby. We've been on Stirling since the first one built, and they make a pretty big family by now. And every speed up on production, like the speed up that resulted from the coupe fairing and the other sub-assembly breakdowns, is meat and drink to us all.
Oh, Mr. Shepherd, S3146 will be ready for test flight tomorrow.
Tomorrow, eh? That's the stuff. Get me Mr. Morton, would you? Hello, Mort. We've got a Stirling ready for test flight tomorrow. Yes, I know this one's a bit quicker, but we're in a hurry to get this war over, you know.